Hi, my name is Will. This is my guide to starting triathlon for complete beginners. So if you're curious about starting triathlon or you are just starting with your triathlon journey, this video hopefully is going to be helpful in getting you from where you are now to your very first race. So first, a little bit about me so you've got a bit of context to where I'm coming from on all of this. I was a swimmer as a kid, probably from about age 3 or 4 or even younger. I started swimming lessons to being able to swim, and then probably from around age 5 or 6 I was starting with proper swimming lessons, doing lengths. Yeah, I did that not super competitively. I wasn't one of those kids who was at the pool 10 times a week, but I swam just once a week, and I was a fairly good swimmer. I was quite competitive at the school swimming events, and I swam once a week from around 5 or 6 I think until around age 11, and then I stopped. But I've kind of grown up swimming a lot in the ocean, and I'm a decent swimmer. And then in around 2021 I started running a little bit, and then I got really consistent with it in 2022, and I ran my first marathon in that year. I had a decent running base, and at that point after running the marathon I thought, I've got the running, I've got the swimming, I want to try triathlon. But at that point I barely could ride a bike. I'd done it a little bit before. I basically couldn't ride a bike for more than 100 meters in a straight line. So I was really starting from zero on the bike, but I had that swimming and that running background. And then I did a couple months of training, did my first triathlon, a tri distance, a super sprint distance in December of 2022. I've been training pretty hard for triathlon ever since, so for about 2.5 years, 3 years now. And I've done a couple of sprint distance. My personal best is 1 hour and 4 minutes. I've done an Olympic, I did that in about 2 hours 20 minutes. I've done a 7.3, which I did in about 5 hours and 11 minutes. And then I've also done an Ironman, which I did in about 13.5 hours. And at the moment I'm training for my second Ironman, which I'm going to be doing at Ironman New Zealand next year in March of 2026. So that is enough about me. The first thing I think you should do is assess where you're at the moment and what your goals are for triathlon. So most people, when they get into triathlon, they've got experience in 1 or 2 or maybe all 3 of the sports, of the 3 disciplines, swimming, biking and running. If you don't, that's totally okay. I'd be very interested to hear why you are getting into triathlon, or what got you into triathlon if you haven't got experience in any of the 3, so definitely let me know if that is you. But whatever your experience is, and more broadly, whatever your athletic experience is, maybe you've never done triathlon, but you've been a competitive football player for 10 years. I don't know. Have a think about that, and then also have a think about, what do you want to get out of triathlon? What are your goals? I mean, for me, I knew that I wanted to be competitive. I had that racing experience doing the marathon and training for that, and I knew that I loved endurance sports and sort of that process of really having a goal and training and bettering yourself and working towards the goal, and then pushing myself hard in training and on race day. I knew I loved that already, so I knew coming into triathlon I wanted to be competitive, and I knew I kind of had the physical ability to do that, as well as probably the right mental attitude to do that. So yeah, I knew I was wanting to come into triathlon and really put a lot of effort into it. But obviously everyone's goals are individual. Maybe you just want to do one race to say that you've done a triathlon. Maybe you want to lose weight. Maybe you want to do something with friends, or maybe you want to, I don't know, just set up good, healthy exercise habits. Whatever it is, figure out what those goals are to you. What does doing triathlon mean for you? And I think having those 2 things, your experience and your goals, having an idea of those and kind of using that to guide you as we kind of go through the rest of the video. So next I want to talk about gear and equipment. I think triathlon is a sport that has a lot of gear associated with it. People can be, I think when starting triathlon, a little bit nervous about the gear, and they don't really know what they need, what is essential, what is not essential, and they don't want to waste money on stuff that they don't actually need, or that's not going to serve them best in their triathlon journey. So obviously everyone has different opportunities, everyone has different amounts of discretionary income that they could spend on triathlon related gear, but kind of assuming that you're starting from nothing, so you've got no experience in any of the sports and you've got a little bit of a budget, but you don't want to spend a whole lot. In terms of gear, this is what I recommend that you need to start out. For the swim, togs. Any togs will do, goggles, and then if you've got long hair, a swimming cap. That's kind of all you need, as well as access to water. So if it is winter where you are, I really recommend you access a pool, and that is kind of an expense that you sort of have to have unless you have access to open water swimming. So whether it's be the ocean or a lake or a river, I would recommend that you only start open water swimming in summer, or at least in the warmer seasons. But either way, some sort of body of water that you can swim in. And then in terms of the bike, you need a helmet to be safe, and a bike. As you're starting out, a great option is borrow from a friend or a family member or somebody, if you can, just to try for your first 2, 3, 4 rides. And then I would recommend buying a used road bike. I do recommend you go to a bike store, get a bike fit. You can do that for free and they'll give you your size, and then it doesn't take long, and you can then look on used bike markets. So on Facebook Marketplace, or in New Zealand we have Trade Me, but I'm sure there's other, eBay I think is the equivalent in other places. Yeah, buy a secondhand bike, buy a road bike probably. It's just more comfortable to ride than like a TT bike, or probably more versatile than like a mountain bike. Or another option is if you've got a gym membership, or you can get a gym membership, they've probably got stationary bikes there. So that is a good way to kind of get started. You definitely do need, let's say you want to borrow a friend's bike for the eventual race that you want to do, you should definitely ride on that at least a few times before the race. But a stationary bike's a good way to build fitness, but it isn't obviously the same as riding outside. But yeah, that's all you really need for the bike, and obviously some exercise clothes, but any exercise clothes will do to start out. And then running, you just need some exercise clothes and running shoes. That is it. I do recommend you get some decent running shoes, because that can save you a lot of hassle in terms of injury. You don't need to break the bank on them. There are some very expensive running shoes. Go to a running shoe store, they will sort you out. But just to start out with, do a few runs and whatever you can. Make sure you are committed to training before you spend any money on it, basically. So yeah, I think in terms of gear, basically whatever you can get your hands on to get started as quick as possible while you've kind of got that motivation. Like if you're watching this video now, you probably have that desire and you're really motivated at the moment. So just get started with whatever you can and build up to it as you go, basically. Then next, let's pick a race. So I really recommend you do a local race. Basically, whatever is the closest triathlon to your house that you can get to cheaply, that you can do without a whole lot of logistics. Sign up for that race and sign up for a short distance. So either a sprint distance or a tri distance, which is sometimes called a super sprint distance. The main factor I would say in considering between those two options is how much time do you have to train. The race is probably going to be in summer, so I'm going to use Southern Hemisphere because that's where I live. Let's say the race is in December and you're in July. You probably could build up to the sprint because you've got almost half a year. But let's say the race is in a month's time, I would go for the super sprint, the tri option, the shorter distance. A sprint distance is going to be a 750 meter swim. Some races do 500 meter swims because just to make that barrier to entry a little bit lower, and then a 20k bike, and then a 5k run. A tri is a little bit probably going to be more varied. It isn't really a standardized distance. My first race was a tri. That was a 100 meter swim, a 10k bike, and a 2k run. It's probably going to be similar distances to that. I think the biggest thing with picking a race is make it as simple as possible for your first race. And then we got to train. So obviously you want to figure out how far out you are from the race. I really do recommend you've got at least 3 months to prepare. And I mean, it completely depends on your athletic history, who you are, how dedicated you are to training, how much time you want to put into it. But yeah, 3 months, let's say that's a good rough guideline, at least 3 months. Now, a few tips about training. If you are coming from experience in one of the sports, so let's say you're already a cyclist, but you're just trying swimming and running for the first time, definitely focus on swimming and running. Focus on your weaknesses, focus on the things you have less experience in, even though it might be a little bit daunting because you kind of maybe have the ropes of cycling, but you don't know what to do with the swimming and the running. Focus on those. I wish someone had told me that when I started triathlon. But if you've got no experience, then you can probably distribute your training fairly evenly and it will become apparent what you're best at and what's your weaknesses. But yeah, that could look like 2 training sessions of each discipline. Monday's a swim, Tuesday's a bike, Wednesday's a run. Repeat that on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then a rest on Sunday. Something like that. Just really basic, just getting started. Again, if you are new, you want to build up to have done the distance of the race in training, in each discipline separately. So you want to be able to, let's say you're doing a sprint distance, you want to be able to do a 20k bike, just standalone. You want to be able to do a 5k run. You don't need to put them together, but being able to do that distance in training is going to give you some great confidence on race day. And then a couple key training rules to endurance sport in general, the 10% rule. So that is where it's kind of generally recommended you don't want to increase your weekly mileage by more than 10% each week. So as you are building up to those distances slowly, let's say you can start with a 5-kilometer bike and that seems manageable for you. The next bike you go for, don't instantly jump to 10 and then don't instantly jump to 15. Like build up slowly. 10% is kind of a rough number, but very simply, very basically, build up slowly. Your next training session shouldn't be that much more difficult than the previous training session. And then in terms of difficulty, most of your training should be easy. To train endurance, you really want to be doing most of your training at a comfortable pace, at a conversational pace. When you're running, if you're running with another person, you should be able to hold a conversation easily. That's kind of the easiest way to gauge. And then if you can imagine that effort level as a number out of 10 and apply that to your swimming and your cycling, it should feel fairly comfortable like you could do it for a long period of time. And you only want a little bit of your training to be hard. And I think as you're just starting out, there's a bit of looseness, a bit of freedom with that. If you're doing that schedule that I laid out before, like 2 of each discipline per week, maybe 1 week, 5 of your sessions are all easy, and then you've got 1 run that's hard. And then the next week, 5 of your sessions are easy, but the one that's hard is a bike. That's kind of how you could do it. You shouldn't worry about it being scientific training at all. Just do it a little bit to feel and what is fun for you, because that is my next thing. You want to make training fun. Triathlon is so fun. If you, as you're kind of getting into it and in the early days, worried about adding in too many complex scientific training methodologies, that can kill the fun a little bit. It is really fun learning about that stuff. I love learning about that stuff, but I think as you are physically getting into doing it, do what sounds appealing and do what sounds like you're going to really enjoy it. Just have fun with it, however that means for you. But keep learning. I think there's a lot of great resources to help you improve your training. You could get a coach, or like me, I'm self-coached, and you can just learn from resources. So YouTube is a great resource. You can read books, you can talk to people. There's so many ways that you can learn about triathlon, learn about training techniques, and I think that is really important, and it's going to be something that really helps you have more of an attachment to the sport, and it's just going to grow your love for the sport. Cool. And then nutrition. I won't talk too in depth about race nutrition, but just more generally, I mean, healthy eating, general practices apply. But I think with triathlon, when you're starting to get into the training, it is a lot of training, and it might be a higher level of activity than you're used to, particularly if you aren't coming from much of an athletic background. Often people are getting into sport and triathlon to lose weight, and I think there is a little bit of a thing that maybe people don't really realize about triathlon when they get started. You need to eat a lot. You burn a lot of calories. You need to eat a lot of fuel to replace that energy, to be able to recover from your training and to have the energy to go through your day-to-day life. But it is very, very, very individualized. It's very person specific. So I can't really go into too much detail, but just from my experience, previous to me doing endurance training, I ate a lot less. Now I eat a lot more doing endurance training. My weight has only fluctuated by a few kilograms. Just because you're eating more doesn't mean you're going to gain weight. Anyway, basically the key thing is eat enough to recover, eat enough to fuel your training, and try and eat as healthy as you can. In terms of recovering from training sessions immediately, I really recommend you try and eat some carbs and some protein within 30 minutes of finishing your training session, particularly if you've done a hard training session. It's really important to get that fuel in as quick as possible. 30-minute window is a good benchmark. And then as you get a bit more into training and you get to doing a bit more longer sessions, this might not come in your first race, but if it does, you do want to fuel sessions that are longer than 60 to 90 minutes. So if you're going to train for about 60 minutes, you probably don't need to fuel actually within the session, but you should have eaten something beforehand. And then if you're going to train for longer than 90 minutes, you probably need to take on some fuel on board during the training. So if you want it to be carbs, you want it to be kind of as simple of a sugar as it can be, so it's as easy to digest as possible, but that can come in the form of a lot of things. So there are sports-specific gels or sports drinks manufactured to be digested during exercise, but you can also just have like sandwiches or just like bread with a spread on it, or like muesli bars, or like fruit, whole lot of options. I would probably recommend you go for more of the real food options and just experiment with a few things, see what works for your stomach, see what doesn't. Again, this one is very individualized. Gels and sports-specific nutrition can be quite expensive, which is why I don't necessarily recommend you go for it at this early stage. It's kind of just important, I think, to monitor your fueling, even if like not super strictly, but just do have it in the back of your mind as you are sort of ramping up your exercise and ramping up your level of activity. Cool. And then last thing, race day. So presumably you've done all the training, you've hopefully enjoyed it, and you're still keen to race and still keen to develop in triathlon. So we've gotten to race day, and I think the key things are enjoy it. Enjoy the atmosphere. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. I would recommend you take it on the easier side. You can definitely push yourself if you want to, but to have a good experience, I think, start out slower than you probably think you can do, just to make sure you can really finish strong, finish on a high note, and hopefully doing the race is going to really motivate you to want to get better at triathlon, want to keep going on the journey, and hopefully sign up to another race, maybe a longer race. Maybe it's going to inspire you to have big dreams. Maybe you want to do an Ironman. And if you are interested about learning more about that longer distance and that journey once you're a little bit further into doing triathlon, you can check out my video on my experience at my first Ironman. That would mean a lot to me if you did that. And yeah, I really hope this is helpful, and I do want to make lots more videos about kind of following that journey of when you're starting triathlon. So if there's anything that you're curious about, let me know. Thank you for watching. See you next time.